Baphomet is a popular cognitive thought form that houses a ton of occulted information within a single image. Baphomet is where we get the term scapegoat. The term came from the powers that be who were blaming everything on the goat representing the head of the devil. In the early 1300s, the Knights Templar were accused of worshipping Baphomet in an indictment published by the court of Rome stating that they worshipped the idol as a god, as their savior, saying that the head could save them, that it bestowed on the order all its wealth. This incident deserves an entire YouTube video in itself because it was at this time when the Knights Templar were making the transition from fighting out in the open on the front lines to working in the shadows. But let's try to stay focused on Baphomet. So first of all, let's get something straight. Baphomet is not the devil. The Bible has no description of what the devil looks like. There is no description of Satan, no concept of any goat-likeness representing Satan. And interestingly, there's a lot of symbolism of the goat representing Jesus, who rose in the zodiac sign of Capricorn, and also the Jewish Jesus figure, Moses, who is sometimes depicted as having horns. However, the Catholics of the Middle Ages used the Greek goat god Pan as the image of the devil. Next, I feel like I should bring up the devil card in the tarot deck in the White Rider, which deserves its own video in itself as well. But the card represents being seduced by the material world. The loose chains around the necks of the demon people represents that they are choosing to be bound by the devil. Their accepting suffering is ultimately a voluntary matter, which consciousness can release simply by choosing another path. There is no need to suffer, guys. You don't need to suffer for your mistakes or your failures from the past. Just learn from them and choose to do the right thing the next time. Okay, so now that we see that Baphomet is in no way associated with the devil and was primarily used as a scapegoat to send the Knights Templar underground, let's now break down as much of the symbolism as possible to fully understand this cognitive thought form so that we can use it as a tool for greater understanding. Baphomet is part goat, part man, and he has breasts and a caduceus for a dick. If this guy were to show up at your house, it would terrify you. So it begs the question, why would the creators of Baphomet choose to depict Baphomet as grotesque, as scary? Well, if you haven't noticed that a lot of the art that came from alchemists were often grotesque or odd or just a little off-putting. This is because the people at that time had a firm understanding about how memory works. And it's important to note that other than memory champions, we've largely forgotten how memory works. And this leaves us at a disconnect with the sometimes off-putting images and symbols of our much more enlightened ancestors. The ancients knew long ago that the key to memory and memorization is visualization, and that we remember best when, as the Ad Herenium, a book published in 85 BC on the art of memory puts it, the image must be exceptionally base, dishonorable, unusual, great, or ridiculous. And Quintilian, author of the Institutio Oratoria, and probably one of Rome's best orators ever, adds that we should disfigure, stain with blood or mud, or assign comic effects to our images for even better effect. And this is why Baphomet and many other depictions of the time were so off-putting. It was purposely created that way so that they were easier to remember. And that's really the key to getting these symbols to rewire your brain. Understanding the symbol is one thing, getting it to stick in your head is another. You want it to imprint deep into your subconscious, creating the possibility for massive change within your psyche. From top to bottom, we have the black moon and the white moon representing light and dark, and the figure between them, Baphomet, showing the non-duality between these two seemingly opposing forces. Next, we have the torch, which represents ultimate achievement, or bringing down light from higher realms, illuminating the lower realms. The torch also conjures up images of Prometheus stealing fire or consciousness from Zeus and giving it to early man. The goat head equals the sign of Capricorn, which is known as the gate of the gods. Capricorn also begins on the 22nd, making Jesus' exoteric birthday being in the same zodiac sign that houses the winter solstice. And Jesus' birthday is also not so coincidentally aligned with the birthdays of Mithra and Horus. And this actually symbolically links Baphomet to the Jesus archetype. This is also important because Saturn rules Capricorn, or Saturn is also known as the black planet, or El. And we can go on for ages about Saturn, but I'll leave that to the hundreds of other YouTubers who've done great work on breaking down the symbolism of Saturn. Next, the horns represent a high level of consciousness. Going back all the way to early man, cows, bovines, and aurochs were horned at the time and were considered deities because they helped till the land, which allowed for humans to transform from nomadic hunter-gatherers to farmers. And this led to the creation of civilizations and higher-level thinking consciousness. This turning wild vegetation into farmland is literally back-breaking labor. And without the use of aurochs and bovines, our conscious evolution would have taken much, much longer, and our ancients acknowledged that. Aurochs were even our first form of currency and have even made it into our alphabet. The A is an upside-down auroch or oxen face, and the bottom two legs of the A would be the horns. And this is also why we see horns on a lot of deities, and even the original crowns of kings were created in likeness to their horns. Next, we have the pentagram. Baphomet's head is a pentagram, and it also has a pentagram on the third eye area. And the pentagram is awesome. The interior of the pentagram has these angles that equal 108 degrees. Another one equals 72 degrees. And then there's the 36-degree one as well. And all of these add up to the number 9. 1 plus 0 plus 8 equals 9. 7 plus 2 equals 9. 3 plus 6 equals 9. And this always just blows my mind when this happens. And it happens a lot in nature and in religion. The pentagram also represents the number phi, or the number of man, and represents the 4 main elements and the 5th etheric element. Baphomet's arms are pointed up and down in a way that you'll see very often in occulted imagery representing as above and so below. On the arms, Baphomet is tatted up with the solve, separate, and coagulate, or to join together, bringing the as above, so below reference full circle, because first you separate the higher from the lower so that you can bring them together as one. Solve to dissolve is the first stage of the alchemical process, if you didn't know, and then the last stage is coagulation, bringing everything back together. This is primarily used in alchemy to break down the self in order to build it back up again into something better. You would repeat the process over and over again, forming a stronger and stronger self by building character, locating and then evening out your strengths and weaknesses, and gaining greater self-knowledge. But for a simple example, to understand solvet coagula better, think of learning how to swing a baseball bat. Swinging a bat is technically one smooth motion, but when you break it down, it's a lot of tiny movements that form one big motion. And the best way to learn is to learn each tiny movement one at a time. You have the step then the pivot, which is all in the legs, but then you have the motion of the bat and how your elbow kind of accelerates into the swing, and etc. All this stuff kind of forms together to form one big chunk, which is the swing. When you master each tiny motion, and your swing as a whole will greatly improve. Baphomet is part human and part animal, representing the animalistic instinct or instantaneous understanding combined with human consciousness. And because of the breasts, Baphomet represents a hermaphroditic figure. A hermaphrodite is the alchemical wedding of Hermes and Aphrodite. That's how you get Herm and Aphrodite put together, hermaphrodite. This unites the masculine and the feminine energies into one, transcending duality. Also, you'll hear it being called androgynous or an androgyne, which were basically singular male, female demigods. Pretty much the same thing. The altar that Baphomet is seated on represents the earth element. The scales on the torso represent the element of water. The torch covers the fire element, and the wings represent the air. But the wings can also represent the spirit rising or flying out of the base matter, much like the Phoenician phoenix rising from its own ashes. And the hooves are resting on what could represent the universe, suggesting that Baphomet is representing the natural laws of the universe and how they cover every square inch of the universe that we're in right now. Next, the phallic region is a caduceus, which represents the dual serpents of the Kundalini. And you have the white snake and the black snake rising up the spinal cord. I'm not going to go deep into this. There's plenty of videos on the caduceus, so no need to go deep here. But moving on, we also have the arch, which could represent the royal arch in Freemasonry. But more importantly, it's dissecting Baphomet at the navel, which is more or less represented as the center of the human body, making the point of balance between the lower and higher chakras, which all need to work together for enlightenment. And finally, the image loosely symbolizes the Kabbalistic tree of life, the torch being Kether, moving on down or up the tree from the horns all the way to Malkuth at the base of the altar. So ultimately, the key here is to understand that Baphomet is nothing to be feared. He is not the devil. He's not representing the devil. Baphomet is a massive cognitive thought form that brings to life a ton of esoteric teachings all into one image. This is the power of symbolism. You really don't need to read a ton of books or watch hours of videos on this stuff if you understand the symbolism. The answers are literally in the art. And if you know the language, you can learn anything really quickly and move on to higher levels of knowledge and understanding much faster. So that's all for me for today. Thank you all for listening, and have a great rest of your week.